Hello, folks. My name is Alan Jones. I'm with HiFi Buys, and welcome to the very first of what we expect to be many HiFi chats. I'm here with John with dCS, Data Conversion Systems, who is their general manager. And thank you for being our guinea pig on this, John.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
One thing I wanted to do is basically, again, welcome everybody. And shall we say, I hope everybody's staying home, doing what they're supposed to. And shall we say, so we can get through this thing as quickly as possible. We're doing this for one, to be able to share some more information. John has been kind enough to agree to get a little bit in depth with him. So we're going to learn some stuff about him on a personal basis. And then also get into the company and also a little bit of music along the way. We look forward to your questions. We've already had several questions get asked and would encourage you to ask questions. It should be way right in front of you to be able to do so. Also want you to like and subscribe to the channel here. As we do more and you subscribe, it'll be easier for you to get there. And also as we get our membership up, I think we're able to get a different URL or something like that for it. So we'd appreciate that very much. But let's get into it. Getting to know John. John, I've known you for a few years, and I know you visited my store that's right behind me back long ago. And anyway, tell us a little bit about, where you are now, a little bit about your family and where you grew up.
Yeah. Well, I currently live just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm in my office. Well, my wife works from our primary family room. We've kind of open concept, kind of family room in our house. So Mama rules the roost there during business hours. And my son and daughter, I've got a son in seventh grade and a daughter who's a junior in high school. And they are hopefully doing their e-learning, so they're doing Zoom meetings and Google Classroom and all that kind of stuff. And actually, as of today, we've been doing this drill for 3 weeks now, and so far so good. We've got to do what we have to do. Me personally,
I would imagine Mama's got it under control
most of the time. Yeah, she was starting to get a little stressed and stir crazy earlier in the week. So we thought she was coming down with something, but everyone's in great shape now. So
fantastic.
Happy to say. But
you've talked a little bit about it, but life experiences, things that have had an impact on you.
When it comes to the whole how I ended up doing what I'm doing thing, my father was probably the most instrumental in that. Back before IBM, he worked for Sony and the Marantz Superscope.
Oh wow!
So he was a bit of a tweak. He built Heathkits and Harman Kardon Award series, tube integrated amplifiers and modified tape decks. He had a pretty much off the shelf Sony reel-to-reel that he modified to do 15 IPS and all that kind of stuff. Right. So we built a really crappy pair of speakers together when I was 11. He took me through things and taught me a little bit about electronics. Not enough to inspire me to become an electrical engineer or anything like that, but and of course the other constant in my life was music. After dinner, the first thing he would do is turn on music, and we'd listen to music as kids. We didn't really watch much television at night. So so between love of music and sort of an introduction to electronics, that it was really my father that inspired me. And also, on some level, he also encouraged me to do what I loved. And, I was actually on a pre-medical track in college thinking that I wanted to be a doctor. And I realized, probably the first semester of my junior year, that I was really enjoying the elective courses a lot more than I was the primary ones. So ended up finishing my studies and then trying to figure out what the hell I really wanted to do with my life, Well, that sort of leads to the next chapter. But yeah,
I spent a good decade trying to figure that out myself. So I get
right. Some people never figure it out, So.
Well, that is true. I now have been in this, 35, 36 years, and had the store open for 25. So as a matter of fact, this month is our 25th anniversary, or my 25th anniversary in business. So
awesome.
How did you actually get into this business?
Well, another instrumental person in my life, I had a high school AP chemistry teacher named Mike Chiaffa. And Mike was an inspiration. I mean, he was smart, he was witty, he was funny, loved music. Had a big system, Hafler gear and VMPS speakers. He used to listen to a lot of heavy metal, and so he kind of identified with a lot of the kids at the time very well. But he was also a researcher. He did Alzheimer's research at night. He taught high school chemistry during the day and did other things at the school that I went to. But he was also a researcher at night for Alzheimer's. And he gave me my first copies of the HiFi magazines, So before that, I mean, my father and I would go shopping at some of the places in New York. And, I saved up enough money to buy my own system. I think when I was like 11 or 12, I can't remember,
What did you buy? Do you remember?
Yeah, no, we listened to a bunch of receivers at the time, and the Onkyo was the one I could afford that sounded the best out of all of them, and a pair of B&W monitors, actually. So there were those two things, and then I had this, at the time I was using my father's dual turntable, and it was a 1019, and, and I saved up enough money to buy halfway decent, had a Harman Kardon tape deck, and later on, after going through a couple of cheap CD players, I bought a pretty high-end Marantz one, when I was in high school. So, and then from there I went to college, and I became more interested in the high end. And there was a shop right on the campus called Goodwin's Audio. And so I started frequenting that and reading some more of the magazines, and that just led to to basically a pretty fierce addiction, I guess you could say, for a while. I went through a lot of gear. Bought a lot of speakers, amplifiers. I've owned a whole bunch of stuff, so I started frequenting a lot of the local stores. And a guy named Steve DeFuria, who's a very good friend and I consider my mentor in the business. He actually gave me a job. I was hanging out at his shop so much, it was a pain in the ass, frankly. And he just decided to hire me part-time, and that's how it started. So that was probably 1995. I started working part-time for Steve, and then I wrapped up my master's degree at Boston University in 98, and I wasn't quite sure what to do for full-time work, and the company was growing, and so I ended up working full-time in the company. And then I ended up going to work for Alan Goodwin at Goodwin's High End for a year before I started doing the line of work I'm in now, which is basically brand and sales management. So. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it went. Yeah.
Well, I knew Stephen well, and what a loss for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We miss him.
I think it's kind of interesting that most all of us that have been in this business, including myself, and we kind of have a hard time leaving the business once you're in it. And the thing that I found is that almost all of us went through that addiction phase. And really, it's almost inbred in us. I think about how many things I've owned in my day and have listened to, and hooked up in different ways, and tried to build my own pair of speakers, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think all of us just about have done something along that lines. And
right.
Anyway, thank you very much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
So, what was the first time? We all have that first time when we're sitting in front of something and we hear it. Mine was actually at a place called the Satellite Center in Casa Grande, Arizona. And I walked in and listened to Steve Winwood back in the high life. I can tell you the speakers, the amp, the preamp, so on and so forth. And it just blew my mind. And I worked for that store 2 days later.
Yeah.
And, so tell us about your experience.
Well, I mean, we always had good sound because, like I said, my dad was a tweak, and he knew how to set things up pretty well, all things considered. And he had a couple of friends that worked with him at IBM. This one guy, Bobby Hamilton, I remember he had these speakers, which later on I figured out were Teals, and they sounded better than my dad's, right? But that wasn't really my first wow moment. Probably the first wow moment was when I started to frequent stores when I was in college, when I was trying to upgrade my system. And a store that's not around anymore on the South Shore here, south of Boston. It was called Carefree Audio Video. A guy named Fred Farmer that used to own a business called the Music Box. And he had a pair of Apogee Duettas, or Duetta Signatures, I can't remember which. And those were something different.
Yes, they were, for all of us.
Yeah. So that was my first wow moment. Was with those Apogees, and to be honest, I don't even remember the electronics. It may have been early Class A. It may have been, I think it was Class A actually, if I remember right. But everything about it, the presentation, the clarity, I ended up having a pair, and that, you know, I ended up buying other electrostats, and I still have a pair of acoustats somewhere with medallion transformers or something. I think my brother's got them. Either that or my mom's cat uses it for a scratching post. I think they're stored somewhere in the basement, but you know, of the old house. But so yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah.
I've had the pleasure of being in front of a few pairs as well, and I remember back then when we finally started making some solid state amps that could handle them, and
Right.
you know, that was some difficult stuff. And of course, Teal had his speakers out, the CS5s, I guess, that were kind of required a similar kind of amplifier. But
Oh yeah, an arc welder.
fun, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about a particular piece of music that, you know, just moves you, and why.
Well, I'm glad you actually gave me this question ahead of time, because I have a really hard time finding a piece of music, because
There's so much.
well, you know what it comes down to for me, and one of the reasons that music is so important to me, is it's tied to memories. It's tied to associations with people and places and events in my life that were important, or even not important. You know, so the place where my parents were 10 years between the two of them, and the place where their musical tastes intersected was the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. So
Wow.
I'll always have a really soft spot for anything from either of those two bands. But the two albums that I probably listened to the most, and I liked the most when I was really young, was Abbey Road, and then Aftermath. You know, so you know that again, I think those albums especially, yeah, just bring back a lot of memories. You know, just you know, growing up and all that stuff. But and then likewise, my dad's side of the family, they were really into country music, actually. And so my grandfather listened to a lot of Johnny Cash and Dolly Parton and Don Williams, you know, some Hank Williams. I've always had a soft spot for Johnny Cash, especially because of that. You know, it took me a while to really understand classical music, because, you know, I was mostly brought up on rock. My father, you know, listened to a little bit of blue note jazz and you know, things like Stan Kenton and you know, Getz Gilberto. They all, you know, some of the classic jazz stuff, but not a lot. It was mostly rock in my house. And you know, so again, it was Steve who took me to the Boston Symphony Hall the first time, and it was in the mid to late 1990s, and we saw Mahler's Eighth Symphony, which is an incredible production. I mean, it's one of the biggest symphonies you could ever hope to see, and it was Ben Zander. There were, I don't know, 150 choralists, you know, spread throughout the top. And that was the first time I'd heard anything in that building. So that sticks with me. And any Mahler symphony is, you know, very, very special to me. And I love them. You know, I could continue to go on, but I mean, you know, it's,
I understand.
So many memories, you know, I mean, current stuff from, you know, but, you know, all in all, I mean, the reasons I have a hard time answering this is that there have been two constants in my life that have kept me centered. And one of them has been music. You know, times when I've been happy, times when I've been really down, times when I needed to think, times when I needed to get away. I found something in whatever it was. And, you know, so that's been that. And the other thing, despite the fact I don't get to do it as much as I like, is just physical activity. You know, I mean, I was always competitive. You know, growing up in high school, we were probably number 5 in New York State, and we won the championship of our league, you know, 2 years that I was the junior and the senior there. And when I went to college, I didn't play football, but, you know, I became a nationally ranked powerlifter, and I won the junior national championship when I was a freshman. And anyway, I mean, so those are the two constants, but, you know, so there's an emotional tie to it also that's really important to me, and, you know, helps me balance myself.
Yep. Music kind of got me centered and got me on my path. So I totally get that. And I think the memories that it's created for me as well have just been just tremendous, and stuff I can't let go. And it's weird when you don't listen to a song for a long time, and all of a sudden you listen to that song and bam, you're right back into that memory in a moment. And
Right.
It's always been a treasure for me to be able to find those things again. So anyway, thank you again for sharing.
Pleasure.
So who is or are your mentors in this business or life? I know you already shared one with us.
Yeah, no, I definitely shared Steve. I mean, again, my family and my upbringing, I mean, that's, very important to being, part of who I am. So I mentioned my grandfather I spoke about earlier, Steve. But I think one of the things, whether I picked it up from other people I grew up with or, my family, but I believe in being a perpetual student. I believe that, everyone that I meet and interact with, I can learn something from them. I've been fortunate to work with, people other than Stephen. I mean, I worked at Lenbrook for, as I believe I mentioned already, for just under 2 years, and very professional organization. Bob Brown was the president there. He taught me quite a bit in the short time I was there. I worked with Michael Kelly at Aerial Acoustics for 3 years after that, and I had the pleasure of working with Jerry Hanna. Jerry was one of the early Madrigal guys. He was there from the beginning in 1993 all the way through when they wrapped up Madrigal in 2003.
That company really went places.
It really did. Yeah, it really did. And so, I learned a lot from Jerry, those three and a half years. And, plenty of other people I could think of, but yeah, not coming to me. But honestly, Alan, I really have a belief that, just assimilating good qualities or practices. I mean, that's something I just try to do constantly in my life.
It's noticed by me and everyone else around you. I have no problem saying that. I look to you as a mentor. As you know, I call you a lot and ask for your advice, and I have quite a few of those in this business, and they've helped guide me, and have gotten me to where I am. And it's
well, thank you.
A pleasure to know you. So,
okay. Likewise, sir.
Thank you. All right, enough of the love fest. We'll all right. We're going to get a little bit more into the dCS end of things now.
Sure.
I want to remind everybody to please like or subscribe, and please ask some questions out there. At the end of this, we will have a Q&A session and try and get through as much of that as we can for you. So we're going to kind of move into the dCS part. What are the main reasons you think that dCS is who they are, not what they are? What I mean by the difference of that?
I think I do. Yeah. I mean, on some level from the very beginning, there was a culture established at dCS. So, when I give, at events like you have, Alan, and other dealers do, when I need to introduce the company, the most succinct way I can do it is to say that they are an agnostic group of problem solvers. So in essence, since the very beginning, the company was founded, by a group of engineers from this Cambridge Consultants, which is still a famous think tank coming out of the Cambridge University system. These guys could have done anything. They had developed, basically technology for DSP and, and different ways to apply it. So the famous first project that they began a separate company out of spinning off of Cambridge Consultants was they won the contract for the Harrier jets radar system, and the type of A to D conversion, which is basically the A to D conversion that they developed there, obviously had applications in other places. So anyhow, there was from there, I guess, being a military contractor, especially, and doing work with the BBC, and then later, a couple of years later, finding applications for their knowledge in burgeoning digital audio. There's always been this professional, very organized, very, I guess, agnostic way of looking at things at the company. And even though most of the people that started the company are only involved on the periphery, the people that are there, it's been imbued in the company. And as new people come on board, they get that. and so there is a just a way that we do things at DCS, and it goes back to the very beginning, and through changes in leadership. The company was initially run by one of the founders, Mike Story, and Derek Fuller and Duncan McLeod. Those were the three guys. And David Stephen, who is our current managing director, his father, who's also David Stephen, he was the marketing director of the company. And when he took it over in the early 2000s, around 2000, I guess it would be around 2004 or 5, he carried forth that same energy, and under his son since 2009, David J. Stephen, the company maintains that. So,
wow,
I think that's a big part of it.
Well, culture is. I mean, great companies are built through their culture, and so
Right.
I'm kind of in charge of our culture here, and get how important it is, and I love that the guys kind of follow that, and they help me enrich that, and I think that's one of the great things about it. So, anyway, good deal. I will tell you, the culture of DCS is seen when we come out, because I know that I myself have been there, and Chris Doty here with our company has been out to see you guys. I don't think I've ever been quite as been on such a learning mission, and I don't mind saying some of it I didn't get, because it's what y'all do is a fairly complex thing, and it's amazing the sound that you're able to get out of the gear, and that's the thing that matters most to me. And so you've talked a little bit of the history of DCS. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I guess just when it comes to the history, I mentioned previously that David Stephen Sr. Took the company over. He actually leveraged everything he had, to do that. And the reason that came to be, all in, that's for sure. The reason that came to be actually was, I guess, part of the other company ethos. One of the other company ethos facts would be that we always try to do the right thing, and we had an unusually difficult time with transport mechanisms. We had Sony and Philips were the two vendors at the time. Our original CD-SACD mechanisms, the Verdes, there were 3 different models. We had P8i player. They were brutally unreliable, and we continued to fix them at no charge for people, replace them, upgrade people. Combination of that and the pro audio market changed drastically. Computer audio workstations started to become a lot more popular. In the early 2000s, as file sharing and Apple, the ability to buy downloads, which were not even CD quality, people started mastering for. There was a big downgrade at that time, right? People started mastering for MP3, and the business was changing a lot. The music business had driven the success of a lot of studios, and at one time in in the 1990s, pretty much any major studio anywhere, and even like second tier, third tier, they would have some DCS equipment, on hand, and that just dried up. So frankly, military contracting, we had our fill of that. The BBC, there's still, as far as I'm aware, there's still a system that runs what's called the PIPS, which is this tone that goes off every half hour. And that was custom DCS equipment to keep that going. I think the last time we had to do any service on that was around 2006-07. But we were kind of looking at where the future was, and there was a big change in the management at the time, because of all of the things going on. Some of the founders of the company left, and, someone had to step up. The company nearly went out of existence, and the Stephen family, actually, we can thank them for being where we are now. They bailed it out, and we're just,
what an amazing vision for him to be able to see that, going after the consumer market and that kind of thing versus the studio market, because y'all built very reliable product. So I the amount of problems we've had, I think, have been maybe one.
Well, we do our best to engineer things, so that, long-term reliability. I mean, that's one of the selling points of the product. We build things to run pretty long product life cycles. And a big part of that is making sure that, the base is strong and it is reliable. So
I think reliability and viability, because, with your upgrade programs and that kind of thing, it keeps the product viable for a long time.
Right.
So,
well, and that kind of ties into, maybe something future you're going to talk about here is, what makes dCS different, but, so.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Okay. So lead me on, sir. Lead
all right, fair enough. So how have the products evolved as the world has evolved?
Well, we don't only play discs anymore.
Right.
So we think about the first range that we had, and my first experience with a dCS product was in probably 1998.
Wow.
Steve's girlfriend at the time was a rep for Audiophile Systems, who was the former distributor for dCS, and she brought an Elgar DAC in, and we didn't quite know what to do with it. It sounded great, but it had all these capabilities, up to 192 and DSD and all of that, but we didn't really know what to do with it. And so they actually brought a piece of pro equipment, this 972 sample rate converter, so that you could actually upsample things to put into it. And it was interesting, but in the end, it wasn't until the company developed a CD transport, because that's really what there was back then. You had MP3s on portable devices where you stuffed everything onto a little hard drive and carried it with you.
How many songs do you have?
Right, exactly. But for high performance audio, it was all discs, CD and SACD. So since then, obviously, we are getting today what we've always been after, which is the actual master. This is the amazing thing. Since in the last 20 years, we've gone from CD, which in a lot of people's minds was highly compromised, to MP3, and now we're swinging back to really getting high resolution audio, through the streaming services, through Qobuz, through Tidal, love it or hate it, MQA. I mean, that does, some amazing things too, and there are engineers that believe in it, so we've had to evolve, and we started that evolution actually over 10 years ago, with USB audio, the early computer audio days, where people actually were ripping CDs onto computers, purpose-built computers. There was a little bit of, David Chesky, I believe, was the first with HD tracks right around that time, right around 2007, 8, to start offering high resolution files. And, some were really great, others weren't. I think we have a much better choice today of better quality material for sure. So, we adapted. We were one of the first, along with Gordon Rankin, to do asynchronous USB. And, we wrote Andy McCarg, our technical director, pioneered that in our products. And, again, as the world changed, and the possibility of streaming things over your home network and then from servers elsewhere, when we introduced the Vivaldi in 2012, 13, we dove right into Ethernet, into network audio. So, you think about the way things have changed in the last 20 years. I mean, since you opened your store, right?
It's
digital audio,
totally different animal. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we all survived the format war.
Yes. Yeah. the one of many. I think, I remember people walking in and going, "What are you going to do with the iPod out?" And I said, "Well, we still require good amps and, speakers and that kind of thing." And,
right.
As time went by, we realized that digital version was, where we're going. And it is amazing, the quality of streaming today. I fought it like many of my friends in this industry. And once I actually, I got a hard drive at home or a NAS drive, and then put a bunch of CDs on it, and then started streaming that at first, and found that very convenient and very easy. Still play vinyl. I'm not in a format war, back or forth in one way or the other. But and then when streaming came along, I fought that too. And then once I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, look at all this music that's out here for me to listen to, and it sounds really good. And what y'all have done is really solidify that place in my store and in my life. And in a lot of people that we work with lives, because, it has made exploring music in a quality way very easy, reliable, and viable. So anyway, I thank you guys for that. So let's start off with one product, which we sold quite a few of. And I think people have been very, very, very surprised at it. It is your entry-level product. A lot of people would go, gosh, that's entry level, but it's an extraordinary product, the Network Bridge. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, as I was just saying, as our newer generation products came out, starting with the Vivaldi and then the Rossini in 2015-16, an important component and something we continue to develop is the streaming platform and the control platform. We have Mosaic now. We had individual apps prior, to that. But one of the things we've always tried to do is find a way to bring customers who have our older products, our legacy products, say, into more modern ways to play music. So the Bridge was primarily designed at first, and if you look at the connectivity, there are a couple of things on there that are very specific to dCS, but the Bridge was designed to bring owners of Elgars and Delia stacks and Paganini and Scarlatti and even Puccini CDSA CD players that have digital inputs and the WC DAC to bring them into the 21st century, right? Mm-hmm. So to basically bring the same streaming capabilities, Mosaic, Room Ready, all the streaming services that are a la carte built into it to allow owners of other dCS products to use it. It just so happened that it's also an exceptionally well-designed product that works very well with other traditional DA converters also. So it's sold equally well, I think, to dCS clients and also customers that have other products.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's
when you talk about the connections on the back that are kind of unique to dCS, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so it has traditional AES EBU. There's a dual AES pair, which in our world, that's where we prefer to do any connections above 192K. That's how our DSD is done, whether it's DOP. Well, we do it over single wire too, but higher sample frequencies we believe in doing over the dual AES standard. There were also SPDIF outputs, but there's also an SDIF, which is an early Sony digital interface, and that's a bit different from Sony Philips digital interface, or SPDIF. So that's actually right channel and left channel data, and then a clock on a separate cable. The earlier Elgars actually, and some of our Pro pieces, that's the only way you can get DSD into them, for example. And the other thing, of course, is it has word clock inputs and outputs, which there are other consumer electronics companies that offer the ability to sync word clocks, but we're one of the few.
Mm-hmm. So I know that y'all had some relationship with Sony and that kind of thing. I didn't really have this in my question list for us, but do you want to share a little bit about what y'all did and worked with Sony on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, early on, and actually, coincidentally, the way the ring DAC works, the frequencies that it operates at, there's no coincidence that they happen to line up with what the DSD standard is. But part of what brought us into pro audio and then consumer audio was some of the research that Sony was doing. They come up with the idea for DSD as an archival format in the 1980s, actually, because after the success of the CD, the Walkman before that, and all sorts of other things. I mean, they'd actually stockpiled a fair amount of cash and started buying music. They started buying, assets. And they wanted an archival format that would survive because tapes are finite. Analog is finite. And so they came up with this idea to do this single bit, very high rate archival format. But it took some help from our engineers and a couple of other people outside of their company to actually make it work. So yeah, there has been over the years, some how do you call it? Some association, between the companies.
Collaboration.
Yeah, we actually created an A to D converter that could actually capture DSD before they did, and likewise we had an SAC transport separate transport before they did. So the original Verdi transport carried DSD over that 3-wire connection, the SDIF connection.
Wow.
And that's where Sony and Philips said, well, other people may want to do this. They made you use FireWire after that, So anyhow, it's all another story, but yeah.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Well, obviously DSD is kind of a staple in our world today. So anyway, I'm happy to see it there. So let's talk about the next product up, which is your latest product introduction, which is the Bartok, which I know the kind of success that I've had with it. And I'm sure that your company worldwide has had some rather tremendous success with it. It comes with and without a headphone amp. And we've just loved having it. The customers that have purchased it have been great. But tell us a little bit about the Bartok.
Yeah. So the way we've traditionally developed lines, we're in our 3rd generation of product line now. And I know we're working ourselves up the range here, but everything is sort of trickled down from a statement, so the Vivaldi that we'll talk about a bit, I guess, where, we came out of that unit trying to get as much of the performance as possible out of the Vivaldi. That's where the Rossini came from. And then from there, the Bartok, follows, it replaces the WC in our line. And if you look at what the WC represented when we introduced it in 2009, it used the same analog board, the same ring DAC analog board as the more expensive Paganini and Scarlatti. We picked the 2 best digital filters as far as we were concerned and put them in there. So 2 choices. The Bartok represents the same thing in the current line. It's kind of a distillation of the most expensive products in our line, everything in one chassis, right? So with the Bartok, we began development on it and in 2018 and probably before that, of course, but we really didn't start shipping it until the beginning of last year. And that it benefited from basically 7 or 8 years of R&D that went into Vivaldi and Rossini. So if you consider, none of our products are inexpensive, and a big part of that's because of the way that they're built. But when you consider that all of that know-how went into this one box, it's a hell of a value. So it has the same exact analog board as the Rossini and the Vivaldi. It shares the processing platform from the Rossini, and then the chassis and the power supply are simplified. So it's got all the streaming capabilities of the Rossini and the Vivaldi range. It's got the ring DAC analog board. It's been a hell of a success. I mean, it's just, I think that there are very few products that offer all of the connectivity and the features. Forget about the performance and the sound. I mean, that's another thing. But when it comes down to, it being a streamer, an upsampler, a reference class DA converter, a preamp, it has a variable output with our volume control, very high accurate volume control. And in the case of the headphone stage, I mean, this again, when you talk about evolution and the way people listen to music, particularly in bigger cities, more and more people that the prices of real estate are going up. People are living in closer quarters, so the fact that a lot of people and the quality of headphones that have been coming out the last 10 years are incredible. So we felt it was time to develop something that would be an all-in-one that would, be inclusive of this customer. So that's part of the reason we, developed the headphone output stage. It was developed by our product development director, Chris Hales, and it's based on the output stage of the ring DAC board on, basically all the DA converters, but it's obviously specialized and optimized for driving headphones, and a very wide range of headphones at that.
And it does an extraordinary job of that. We've sold 2 of these as basically desktop units for guys in their offices and that kind of thing to use with headphones. And it's, I don't know, why. I guess what I've been really surprised by it, I've had a lot of people that have been looking at like a lot of $5,000 to $7,000 to $8,000 DACs. And when you think of the combination of the DAC and whatever they're plugging into it and the ability to be upgraded over the years, it kind of starts to make sense that they ought to make this investment into the Bartok. And they see that after they go out and kind of do their homework. And, we chat with them about it a bit. And I don't know, I just find it that the value is much more than the product you see sitting on the shelf. And
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's what we aim for.
well, you seem to nail that pretty well. So,
Thank you, Alan.
all right, so let's talk about Rossini. You've got you've got 3 products in the Rossini line. Have the Rossini with the tray and also without. We've sold both. And also the Rossini clock, which we've actually hooked up with one of the Vivaldi ones that we sold as well. So tell us a little about the Rossini line.
Yeah, well, so again, the Rossini line was introduced in 2015-16 as a way of putting the Vivaldi flagship system into a less expensive offering. So we did our best to distill down everything that was in the Vivaldi to 1 or 2 boxes. So we initially launched as you say, a Rossini player, which was CD only. So it was a player streaming DAC, and then the Rossini DAC, which was a streaming DA converter. The Rossini clock, the master clock. Again, this comes from our pro heritage, and we'll talk a little bit more about separating the critical aspects of digital playback, when we talk about the Vivaldi, which is the ultimate expression in our view. But we also, you did forget one newer unit that we came out with last year, which was the CD-SACD transport. So the Rossini range, when we launched it, we would have loved to have had the Rossini player be SACD as well, but there were no mechanisms that met our specifications at the time. And the mechanism we selected is way too big to go in the existing player. So the whole goal with that range, again, was to give you as much of the performance of the Vivaldi in a much less expensive package. So that's what Rossini is. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things I noticed when you came out with the Bartok, how close it sounded to the Rossini, and then all of a sudden you came out with an update for the Rossini, and then it kind of stepped up to another level, and we got back to the tiers again. And so anyway, it was an interesting time. It's kind of like I always tell everybody that at the time you buy your product, it's the worst it's ever going to sound. And and they normally look at you and go, wow, it's going to sound better. And you can go, yes. And the one thing I've always seen is when you do the updates, it's a very consistent across the board. Wow, this is a nice update. And it's not something I see in other updates that are happening with other companies, it appears. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of how we build things, the fact that it's all proprietary hardware that gets programmed, by our team, buys us an immense amount of flexibility. So, there are other companies, more and more companies that are using these FPGAs that we use. But I can say with confidence that no one quite uses them to the extent that we do. But in the end, whether we're adding features or we come up with something, as you say, the Rossini 2.0 upgrade was substantial, and that added additional what we call mapping algorithms to the ring DAC generator, the mapper that drives the discrete DAC, and that was something we derived from the Vivaldi. So that's what we aim for over the course of the product's lifetime. I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about the predecessor of the Bartok, the WC, and that was 9 years old and got one last major update in December of 2018 before we discontinued it to bring the Bartok out. So we can't make an absolute promise that we're going to do that with every product, but it's our goal basically to completely optimize and do the best we can with any given product in any line before it gets discontinued. So,
yeah. Well, Moore's law is still in effect, so y'all must severely overbuild these things, and so that you have the ability to go to the places you need to.
Well, yeah, that's the other side of it. I mean, every time we come out with, like I said, we're in 3rd generation of home products now. We started in '95, so that's a pretty big, broad time, for each product line. But we start with a certain amount of capacity, and as you say, Moore's law does obviously apply here too. As the FPGAs get more capable, faster, have more gates, they have more cores that you can do separate things with. It gives you the ability to do a lot more in them. That's kind of when you have to move on from an old generation, when there are things you need to do that the hardware that you base that platform on, is beginning to show its age. So,
yep, amazing. All right, so before we go any further in the range, tell us a little bit about what sets dCS apart from the crowd. There is so much digital stuff out there now. It's mesmerizing for the public out there. Sure. I don't know how, without me being in my position, how in the world would I ever make a decision?
Yeah. Well, I mean, frankly, there are a lot of products out there, and there are a lot of companies that have, their own beliefs and stories. But ours is pretty straightforward. There's really nothing built the way our stuff is built. The ring DAC was something that was conceived by dCS, back in the late 1980s, it effectively, again, going back to the company, just the base ethos of the company in being agnostic and looking at a problem and just trying to figure out the best solution to it. There were problems with ladder DACs. There were problems with the original single bit Delta Sigma DACs at the time. And with the ring DAC is almost a hybrid between a PCM, traditional PCM DAC, and a single bit switching, high bit rate, converter. And over time, it's evolved, and our team knows from the standpoint of measurements and board layout and what we can do in software, we know what we can improve by making changes in the hardware and the software. So in the end, the hardware itself is bespoke, and there's nothing like it. The way we measure and test things, I think there are very few companies that do what we do in that realm. In the end, if something's commercially viable, a heated topic still to this day in some circles is MQA, and, when that became a commercially viable thing, we decided to incorporate it. And the thing about it is that there's no decision you make in engineering that has no downside. The bottom line is you try to make decisions that have the least compromise, and you try to identify all the weaknesses so you can engineer against the weaknesses of something. So whether it's PCM, DSD, MQA, whatever, network audio, USB, there's research you can do to find out how you can make it better, or the right way to do it, I guess you could say. And that's kind of what we do, what we try to do anyway.
Okay. Awesome. The ring DAC is there's nothing else out there like it that I'm aware of. And, I was amazed when I kind of went through y'all's museum in Cambridge, basically about seeing the boards as they have progressed, the power supplies as they progressed through the time and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
You guys, as you say, you're on third generation of product, but you really only had about 9, so many products out there. And it's amazing when you think about that over a 30-year period, what that has entailed and how specific you really are to each of these products. And I think it really shows a very narrow-minded vision, meaning, and it doesn't mean you don't look across the world at what needs to be done, but it's a very, very narrow focused vision of what you're trying to achieve. And I really admire that. So
thank you. Thank you.
So you've talked a little bit about the flagship series of products, the Vivaldi.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. I have one of the products here in the store, and shall we say it's in our flagship room with our big Vanderstein 7s and that kind of thing. And it sounds just amazing in there.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, so again, that Vivaldi was the first real significant break from the old design team. And what I mean by that is not to say that the Scarlatti that was the previous flagship, wasn't a lot better than the Elgar. It was. But for the most part, because of what was happening when the Scarlatti and the Paganini and the Puccini were being designed, the fact that we were transitioning the company, it was really kind of make or break times. A lot of the old formula was used, I guess you could say. We improved everything. We had to. Well, that was the other big factor I didn't mention was ROHS or ROHS, which is the necessity these days of building electronics without any lead or mercury or any of that stuff, and building a board and not knowing, because solder makes a difference the way it sounds, not knowing what it's going to sound like was crazy, But we launched that entire line prior to Vivaldi, and our design team led by Andy McCarg and Chris Hales, had the luxury to basically say, okay, how do we fundamentally improve the ring DAC analog board? How do we fundamentally improve the control board, which is the other side? That's our motherboard that drives that ring DAC board. And, it was a very big difference, So Vivaldi actually, from the standpoint of performance and capability, all of that, was a big game changer for us. Now, traditionally in our systems, they're unique. There are other companies that do some of what we do, but the fact that we split our flagship system into what we consider the four most critical aspects of performance. There's the transport, which started off initially as just a disk transport, CD. But today, your transport can be a subscription to Tidal or Qobuz. It can be, can be your NAS drive. It could be a computer or some server, connected USB, right? So that's a critical aspect. Where are you getting your digits from, right? The next, of course, that's obvious is the DA converter, and going back to the late 1980s, companies realized that if you took this noisy, thing that generates mechanical vibrations in a disc player and separate it, so this is kind of old. Transport DAC, that's something that was, that's been done for a long time. Master clock, which we have, in the Rossini range and the Vivaldi range. I mean, that again comes from our experience in pro audio, and having a dedicated box to synchronize the clocks of all of the associated other components. That's very common in pro audio. It's a necessity in pro audio. But in home audio, what it really came down to was the engineers were pretty incredulous about the whole concept initially, but it made a big difference in the sonics, when they tried it. And ultimately, they were able to measure lower jitter and more accurate clocking. And the reason is that no matter what you do, there are draws on the power supply. There's all sorts of DMI and RFI inside a box. So, the common conjecture is that the only place for a master clock is to have it, micrometers away from the DA converter. Well, when that processor, that DA converter, most of the time a chip, when that thing actually goes under load and it's processing something, it's going to create draws on the local power supply. It's going to emit all sorts of spurious radiation, So the closer the clock is there, the more its environment is affected by the other components around it. So again, like I said earlier, any decision you make in engineering, there's a potential drawback, right? So when you have the clock, the system clock in its own particular environment, it's got a dedicated environment that never changes. The program that runs the clock is basically just saying, you're generating this crystal is generating 44 kilohertz audio. This is generating 48K. Never changes, right? So there's no changes there in the environment from the standpoint of draws on the power supply or anything like that. And then you've got your own mechanical thing. Remember that really high grade clocks are based on electromechanical devices called crystal oscillators. So their mechanical environment is particularly important. So having a mechanical environment that's dedicated, electromagnetic environment that's dedicated makes a difference. The downside, it's expensive, and you can screw it up if you use really bad cables. So in the end, again, it may be the least compromised way to go. Plenty of people will debate that with us, but it's certainly not the least expensive way to go. Anyhow, and the last box is the upsampler or the sample rate converter. Talking about upsampling and taking a signal and manipulating it, again, that's something that can cause all sorts of debates. But there are reasons to do it. There are things you can do in digital filtering that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. you're taking some of the processing load off of the DAC when you do that. Most importantly, from our standpoint, in the context of the reference system, that's where we want you. That's the hub. We want you to plug all your noisy sources into that. So they're a step removed from the critical DA conversion and the critical clocking. So that's the other function that the upsampler serves in the reference system. So it does something to the signal that, in our view, betters it, but and improves performance. But it also isolates noise further from the critical stages.
Yep.
So there you have it.
You've got all your network connections and that kind of thing in that the upsampler, oversampler, and
that's right.
I know that when we've added that to a system, it's made a rather nice difference. So Vivaldi range of products are they're just beautiful to own, beautiful to have, beautiful to look at, and beautiful to listen to. And we're proud to have sold quite a bit of those as well.
Thank you.
In this crazy world right now, you and I were talking the other day that it's like a full-time job trying to find yourself around this and maneuver around it. So tell us a little bit of how you have managed to, the changes in your workflow, just so everybody else out there knows they're all in the same boat too. And it kind of
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when I'm not traveling, I mean, for me, as you know, I mean, we've been doing business together for what, 4 years now or 3? I can't remember. I think 4.
I think it's 4. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of our business is our personal relationships and doing events, and we advocate for dealers. We don't have many dealers, and the reason is we only advocate for real value added people that understand they're building a community. That's what HiFi Buys does. And that's the reason we're working together. I mean, there aren't too many places that share the same, just mentality and values. So big change for me over the last month is I haven't been able to go anywhere. I mean, I've spent the better part of the last 20 years, between 50 and 70% of my life has been on the road. Out there visiting with people, and so that's a big change. I mean, aside from that, we saw the writing on the wall that we needed to basically prepare for this 3 weeks ago. Actually, 3 weeks ago, myself and Jesse Luna and Andrew Papanikolaou from Arizona, who's on our development team, we were going to be joined by 4 other people. Jim Fuller, our service manager. We were going to be in the UK. And
wow.
Fortunately, we decided to cancel a training trip like you and Chris have been on right before we would have had some difficulty getting back, and potentially put ourselves and everyone in the factory in harm's way. So yeah, 3 weeks ago we called off the trip. And then the week following, we took steps to have non-critical people stay home and work from home. So sales and marketing have now been working from home for 3 weeks. R&D went home 2 weeks ago, and have been continuing their work there. And up until a week ago today, we only had people doing production in the building, and now we're actually shut for 2 weeks. Well, we'll see after 2 weeks if we're going to be coming back or not. So from our side, I mean, we're very, very fortunate, to have had, I mean, a lot of us have been blessed with good business, in the last 6 to 12 months, thanks to so many different things. So we're in a very good position. We have, 31 or 32 employees between here and the UK, and to the best of my knowledge, we're not looking to make any cutbacks or any changes at this point. So we're all in this together, so we all have to, just do what we can to stay safe and, try to get this over with as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. It's been what I've been trying to do as well, is basically keep the team together, which I have at this time, and will for the foreseeable future. And we had some fairly tremendous months before this, so very thankful for that, to be able to go into this in a much more, how should I say, solid position. And But we have definitely, it feels like we've been just making adjustments almost every 2 or 3 days. And it's hard to believe when you think about, 3 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago and how different it kind of felt then and how it's probably going to feel very different in a week from now. But anyway, so the we're pretty much towards the end of that discussion. And John, I want to thank you very much for being here. We're going to take some questions and see if we can't, I don't know,
answer them.
Dump John. But I think one of the things that I just, again, want to ask everybody, if you will, please to like and subscribe to this channel. You end up finding what we end up having is a few questions we're going to go over with. So let's see, from Mike M. Let's see, I think he was asking about the MQA perform the second unfold, and the answer to that I can probably handle for you. The second unfold is actually handled in a DAC. So you would need a DAC that actually is capable of handling that. Or you take the bridge, network bridge, and put it into a DAC again that's capable of that, or get a Bartok, which actually can do both.
Right. So this is the question from the gentleman who was asking if there'll ever be a second unfold inside the network bridge.
Yes.
Right. And the answer is no, because the second unfold, or the render, as they call it, that is tied to the DA converter. There are filter coefficients. There are actually 16 different filter coefficients with MQA, depending on the source material. And they need to know what the DAC is in order to do the render properly. On that note, we didn't really get into it, but we have, I think what I'm allowed to say is the reference MQA decode and render. So basically, Andy McCarg, our technical director, was able to write the filter coefficients exactly. And so our MQA implementation is different from every other one out there.
And you can tell it when you hear it. I've been just amazed by that. Okay, so let's see. We've got a question from Larry F. What does dCS do to make sure that their products, once purchased, will not be obsolete as it relates to technology in a short time?
Okay. Well, so again, within the realm of our typical product life cycles, I mean, we're not going to rebuild, a 15 or 20-year-old product to be able to do everything that that it is required of what
Correct.
we would take bring a new product to market today. But we do take steps. There's a certain amount of modularity built in where we may need to change something. Case in point, when the Vivaldi was first introduced, the upsampler that actually has the network board, that was put on a separate interface board that was managed by its own FPGA. And that allowed us in 2016 to revise the upsampler and replace that interface board with a new network card. So there's a certain amount of modularity built in places where we know that we may need to change the hardware. Same was true in our last generation product with the USB, and also in the current generation. And most of the other stuff we can do in software. So things we've done just since Vivaldi and Rossini have come along. I mean, I can't even think of everything, but native support for Tidal, for Cobuzz, for Deezer,
wow.
Mosaic, the control platform, Rune Ready. When the old app that we were co-developing with someone wasn't really working great in the early days of Vivaldi, Rune. I think we had our Rune Ready implementation in 2016 or early 2017, and so the platform's super flexible. And from the standpoint of performance, we've made changes, substantial changes to the way that the clocking's handled internally over the course of software generations in Vivaldi and Rossini. We did some research and figured out a better way to map the information that's generated in the control board to this ring DAC format that drives the discrete analog board. And that was the Vivaldi 2.0 DAC update. It was just software. substantially improve that, substantially improve the Rossini. Yeah. So we do the best we can. You know, when our customers want something, I mean, if it's commercially viable, I mean, one of the next things that, you know, we'll be working on, I can't say when, but in Mosaic, we'll eventually have support for, you know, for Amazon at some point as well. You know, the Amazon HD service, I'm sure. Can't say when, but, you know, but anyhow, hopefully I answered that.
Yep. I think, you know, in generalized form is basically y'all have obviously an enormous amount of expertise, or you wouldn't have so many first going down the digital line from 30 years to today. And I think, you know, your machines are obviously shown that they are built with a very openness for improvement and technology to be able to be adapted to them. And I think that's been proven over the years as well. So. Yeah. Also from Larry F., and I think we covered this a little bit in our interview here, but what do you see as the key drivers that separate your product from your competitors?
Well, again, yeah, we did cover it, but I mean, we do things differently. You know, we design our own hardware and program the software to make it work. So that really buys us, you know, a nearly infinite amount of flexibility with what we can do, you know. So from the standpoint of measurements, from the standpoint of performance, you know, we do our very best to build the best product we know how to do, know how to build. So, and we'll continue to do so. Continue to, you know, we aim to be the leader in digital audio, and in the end, you know, there's a combination of innovation and assimilation of other technologies, you know, be it, you know, the ability to access streaming services, the ability to process certain codecs, you know, like MQA, for example. You know, so yeah, I'm not quite sure what else to say there, but
you're all good.
Okay.
I think you answered it well. I think without a doubt, I know in my mind and the folks that work with me in their minds, and I know most of the manufacturers around the country use dCS product in their systems, and you end up finding y'all are absolutely, and I think all of our opinions basically are the world leader in digital. And you know, the headphone stage, gosh, who knows where we'll go with that. I can't wait to see what might happen. But anyway, from Jeff C, is there, and this is actually a good question, is there a recommendation of using a preamplifier for volume control versus their built-in volume control for ultimate fidelity based on the limitations of volume attenuation in the digital versus analog domain?
Okay, well,
so we've had this conversation, so
no, that's okay. We are not anti-preamp by any means. I mean, even if you don't have analog sources, you know, turntable or something like that, there may be something that a preamp brings to your system. Okay, you know, be it you know, certain tube preamps especially will have a certain bloom to them. They'll have a certain spatial quality. They'll have a certain texture to them. You know, if you like what a preamp does in your system, great. The one thing I'll say though is the digital volume control that we employ in our products is done at such a it's done at such a level that I'm just going to say it's superior to pretty much nearly every analog implementation. It's more linear. It's lower in distortion. But you know, there are some really great analog implementations out there that bring something to the table. You know, so I would say that, and I'm not going to put a price number on it, but you're potentially doing more harm than good putting a preamplifier between our products and your amplifier. The only thing you can get is loss and distortion. But the best preamps that are out there, you know, they actually do bring something. I've heard it with my own ears. So it's really up to the owner. I mean, I would say, particularly if you're on a budget and you're not buying the ultimate preamplifier, you probably will find driving your amplifier directly with our output stage will outperform, you know, moderate preamplifiers by a mile.
Well, you also have the ability to get to 6 volts on the output, so that's.
Oh yeah, it'll drive pretty much anything. Yeah.
Okay, Jeff has another question for us. Thoughts on room correction? Any third-party setups that you guys think would work well while still retaining the benefits of dCS DAC decoding, since correction is usually done in the digital domain? Would be interesting to see dCS incorporate their own room correction in the future.
Well, I mean, we've got a team of engineers, and I know for a fact that there are a couple guys on staff that have interest in that. We haven't cut anyone loose on that yet, but by any means. But I can't really say. Well, what I will say is that there's no room correction or not. There's no replacement for getting a pair of speakers to lock to a room. Okay, so if you have a dedicated room and you don't set your speakers up properly, room correction isn't going to help you. Okay, if you have limitations and your speakers need to be set up in a way that they weren't really designed, and I've been in rooms where customers just absolutely had to have a big pair of speakers sandwiched between a wall unit cabinet kind of thing, and there was no chance that they were going to sound good. And I've heard room correction do wonderful things there, so it's been around for a long time. In fact, I mean, my early days working, there was this, I can't remember the name of the name of this gentleman, but there was a product called SigTech that was out in the late 90s, and he used to come by and bring prototypes to our store, so I've heard room correction do some amazing things. But, again, unless, in my view personally, and not the company's view, but in my view personally, if you can get most of your issues with the room dealt with speaker placement, and then a certain amount of treatment, you're better off. You get a more natural sound. You get when you have a physical lock to the room correction achieves that through processing. Granted, but I haven't heard anything that's as good as a great room and a great system set up properly in a great room.
Yep, it's always been kind of my belief over the time, and I very much agree with your statement in that, and get the room right and get the speaker set up right. Spend the time doing that, and you end up finding that I also believe that, or kind of had seen in what I listen out of systems, it seems like PSP, and the more you do to it, sometimes you can actually add noise to the system and that kind of thing, and you lose a bit.
Yeah, or it can sound mechanical. It can sound mechanical, or just something about it just not right, But it, it's the future. I mean, there are some great products out there that incorporate it. And again, there are certain situations, installations where, whether it's an aesthetic choice or just the room itself, there's not much you can do about it. Wrong dimensions, wrong material. Right. There are places for everything, honestly.
Yep, absolutely. Have you used rooms correction?
Personally, I haven't. But I know some people that have, particularly I think they have a parametric EQ, which getting the bass right in a room is one of the biggest challenges. And I know some people that are very happy with it, to be honest.
Okay, awesome. So there's something for you on that, Jeff. Let's see, Jeff. Also, any chance we'll see a desktop app, OS X especially, or web interface version of Mosaic in the future?
I don't know, to be honest. As far as I'm aware, we're going to leave it on iOS and Android at this point. I don't know that there's enough of a call for it. It's a considerable undertaking to do that, but as of right now, I'm pretty sure the answer is no. But that could change in the future.
Next question. This is from another Jeff, but with a Jeffrey P. When can we expect a software update to the Bartok?
That's a good question. We've had a couple since the Bartok has been. So if he's talking about a big software update, I have no idea. I mean, we've been revising Mosaic and revising and improving Mosaic. I know we have something else in beta right now. We actually have a small group, that does some beta testing for us. So there will be another Mosaic release at some point in the next 2 or 3 months. In terms of a major software upgrade, I'm not really at liberty to say anything about that, but I can tell you that there is some research being done right now, and we're hoping that some of what comes out of that is going to benefit the Bartok for sure. So.
Y'all have a pretty large engineering staff with you. I remember when I was at the factory, I was literally amazed at the amount of people that were working, and I didn't even see everybody, but it was amazing to me to see the amount of people and the intelligence of the guys that we met too. So,
Well, thank you.
Just really, really wild. So we have one last question, I believe, and this is from Brent Yu. I am a happy Bartok owner. Is there a particular headphone you use to test and voice the headphone amp?
We've actually amassed an incredible library of headphones, and some of them for their difficulty to drive, some of them for, there are a lot of different ones. I can tell you what we have at the factory. We have the Abyss Total Consciousness, the 1266 TC. We have Metsei. We have numerous pairs of Odysseys. We have the brand new, I think it's the LCD 2.4 or 4.2. I can't remember. I think it's 2.4. We have LCD. We probably have a pair of LCD 4s. We have, what else do we have? I can't remember. So I know one of the, we have some HiFi mans as well. We've got this as far as we have, what else? We actually have a program manager we hired specifically to manage this stuff, Steve Smith. He's gonna be mad at me if I don't remember all the headphones, but but no, honestly, the goal when we developed the amplifier runs Class A, and part of the reason that we designed the amp the way we did was that it would adapt to the different ranges of impedances without needing a gain switch. So there are a lot of headphone amps that actually have a gain switch, so that or a load switch, so that if you have a high impedance headphone, you have one flip switch and load the other way. So the way that Chris Hales designed the amp in the Bartok, it basically shifts between voltage and current depending on what load it sees. So there are a couple of headphones that, if you like to listen loudly, it may not drive it 100% to, your liking. The HiFi Man accessoires are one of them. Those are particularly hard to drive. But for the most part, we're aware of what people are out there and listening to. And the amplifier was designed to be compatible with the broadest range of headphones out there. And it's not particularly voiced. I mean, our stuff is designed to be linear, and no matter what it drives, it should sound the same. In other words, if you like a warmer sounding headphone, then buy a warmer sounding headphone, and the amp is going to deliver full resolution to it. If you like a headphone that's a bit more, a little more detailed and really critical, like the Abyss, for example, I mean, those are extraordinarily detailed. The amplifier sounds great into those too, So anyway, very long answer to the question. I'm sorry about that, but
And they always accuse me of rambling.
Yeah, well, what can I say?
That's all good, John.
It's so easy to talk. So easy to talk to you, Mr. Jones.
I love. I truly love working with you. I always learn stuff. This has been educational for me. I want to again remind everybody to like and subscribe. This is the first of what will be many HiFi chats. John, thank you so much for coming on board and spending the time with us today.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who took the time to listen. Hopefully, it was fun and
it was for me. I know that you're going to have some of your folks around the audio industry that watch this will make a comment or two to you, I'm sure, on things in your life. I will tell everybody goodbye at this moment. But anyway, from John Quick with dCS and Alan Jones with HiFi Buys, this has been HiFi Chats. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.